So Tobias and his partner are coming from Marbella today. They represent a company called Assetfolio, right? And they're also into crypto and blockchain, so they came to check out what's going on in Gibraltar. So grab them and meet them. Okay, so my name's Denise Matthews. I'm chapter director of Startup Prime Gibraltar, founder of One Media and Events, and also operations manager of the Blockchain Innovation Center. And we run monthly events, so thank you all for being here. So we have two special guests, Dr. Friederike Ernst, who is nothing short of a miracle that she's here because we were not expecting her, so we're really happy to welcome her. She's the COO of Gnosis and a trained physicist with several years of research experience in basic science. She is joining us as a prominent woman in tech. And a little bit about Gnosis, although we'll go into that later. You build new market mechanisms to enable the distribution of resources from assets to incentives and information to ideas. The basic, for me. So, Peter Morris, hello. I don't know you. He's the CTO of Playtech Games Innovation Labs and the co-managing director for Girls in Tech. Late 2017, the company expanded operations locally as their largest clients hold core operations in Gibraltar. Founded in 1999 and premium listed on the main market of the London Stock Exchange, Playtech is a technology leader in the gambling and financial trading industries. Did you know that? Okay, so we're going to start with Dr. Friederike. I wanted to talk a little bit more about women and the tech industry today. We'll delve into blockchain and gaming a little, but I think it's important to leverage that. So you studied biology, but ended up with a PhD in physics, and later at Columbia and Stanford University for a postdoctoral program. How did this transition come about?
I started off in... change everything. Fantastic. I started off in biology and ended up in... Oh, this is very loud. And ended up in computational neurobiology. So I actually looked at how vision is processed in the brain. And I thought this was super fascinating. But all the other people in the same research lab, they were physicists and mathematicians. So I decided that in order to actually compete with them on the same level, I would also become a physicist. So I actually started over and I took a whole other degree in physics and then kind of got stuck there. So I had always intended to go back into neuroscience eventually, but actually found physics equally fascinating. Then went on to do a PhD and was in basic research for a while after that.
So Peter, tell me a little bit about growing up and tech. Were you attracted to that? It's exciting.
So I grew up in South Africa, where in the apartheid era, so we already had sanctions, so tech was kind of hard to come by. So when you came by it, you grabbed it, right? I got into computer games when I was a kid, then I got punished and got told that for my holiday I had to learn how to program. So I did that and realized that making games was better than just playing someone else's game. And so that's where my love of tech started. And ever since then, everything I did from school and after school was always around creation of ideas and actually making them happen.
Okay, back to Friederike, because we're talking a little bit in the background stage, in the beginning stage, sorry. So during your studies and early stages of looking for suitable positions, did you feel prepared professionally for what came after?
you're never really prepared. You just have to jump in and do the best you can, and you'll learn, and you'll become good at it. I think that's always been my motto, and it's worked out well for me.
Cool. So, Peter, do you think educationally in the tech space there could be more done generally from the very young age to now in terms of the diversity and teaching tech?
I think in terms of tech, a lot has happened since I was learning, right? You now get specialized schools that focus on a particular discipline. So if you want to become a game developer, you can actually go to university to become a game developer. That's how broad the field is. I think we're going to start seeing very focused institutions being designed around a particular aspect of tech, be it AI, blockchain, gaming, etc. I think the one thing that I'm seeing that I'd like to see changed is that the students coming through the system now are used to being spoon-fed information. They don't actually know how to look for it. And I'm not kidding you. Some people don't even know how to use Google, right? Which is scary. So the one thing I'd like the institutions to improve on is not spoon-feeding the answers to their students, but actually challenging them to find the answer, even if it could be the wrong answer, but challenging them to get the right answer, hopefully. In terms of diversity, this is a problem. This is why Girls in Tech exist. This is why all these organizations and efforts exist. I think there is a certain amount of work that the universities and the institutions can do, that the government can do, and I'm saying that specifically because Gibraltar is actually quite progressive in this sense. They've just launched the Women's Mentorship Initiative. But I think it started way back when, right? If you all think about, if you had brothers or sisters, who was the one playing on the Atari or on the Xbox? It was always probably your big brother, right? Or your dad, or your big brother and your dad. It wasn't a girl's thing, right? So I think there was a unintentional stereotype created right from the beginning, just at the gaming stage, and that kind of has translated over the years into education, and we're seeing that there's actually been a steady decline in the number of not only university registrants in the UK and the US for STEM field research and studies, but it's been declining quite steadily. I think we're at 16% in the UK at the moment, where we used to be at 37% 10 years ago.
Okay. So Friederike, in terms of how you entered this space, did you feel that diversity is a problem?
For sure. So I was the only the only female physicist in my class. There were 50 people. I know that 2 years above me there was also a woman. So there were very few and far between. And yeah, that is a problem, because when you're somewhere, you feel the burden of not just representing yourself, but in a way your tribe. That inhibits you in many ways. So that actually makes you more afraid of making mistakes, because then it's not just you who hasn't understood something, but it's girls, and that's a large burden to carry. So I think this is also, and I mean the way that you learn is by doing things that you weren't comfortable with before. Like you just said, being spoon-fed things is not the way to learn. It's the way to truly learn and deep dive into something is to venture into territory that you're not comfortable with. And if you feel failing will reflect badly on your tribe, then that is a problem. Yeah.
So it kind of made you work harder and have to prove yourself more. Maybe that was how you felt in that environment.
Yes and no. So I think it's two things. So one effect is the one where guys underestimate you. But I don't even think that's the predominant one. I think the men I've encountered in physics, they're actually quite reasonable. I mean, they know you have a brain. They know you can probably do this. I felt that the thing that's more limiting, that was more limiting to me in the beginning, and that I feel is more limiting to a lot of women, is the way that you see yourself. So basically, if you fail, it's not just you who's failing, you're failing your own sex. I mean, that's horrible. That's a lot of pressure to be under.
Cool, so tell me a little bit more about how you started your career with Gnosis.
I actually knew both the founders. We'd been friends when we were at university, and I had been in research for a while. I had always been super fascinated with what they were doing, and they asked me to join, they asked me to join a number of times, and eventually I said, yeah, that would actually be pretty cool, and I joined them.
That was quick. Back to you, Peter. How has gaming innovation developed since you started your career?
So you want a long answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. So to give you some background, I started in gaming when I joined microgaming back in South Africa, and I was building the poker network. Poker was the big thing back then. World Series of Poker had just gone televised, and everyone wanted to play poker. You know, the good old days. And there was a lot of competition in poker because you needed to have the latest games, you needed to have the latest features, the latest bonuses and everything. So in terms of the difference between casino and poker, there was a lot of innovation, a lot of competition, and the two fields actually diverged quite heavily. In terms of innovation, it's hard to say how, there's people always, you have to innovate to stay relevant. If you don't, the company will close and you move on. That's just the long and short of it. A lot of companies are realizing that they actually need to start investing formally in innovation, which, for example, I'm going to call out like a few companies that I respect quite highly. Kindred has always invested in innovation. NetEnt has always been investing in innovation. It's the older incumbents that have only realized a little bit later that they also needed to start moving forward in order to start competing with the smaller guys that had been kind of inventing all this new cool tech that everyone was gravitating to. And so you have the micro gamings, and you have the Playtech. They've now invested heavily in innovation. They understand that they have to do that to kind of reinvent the tech and themselves as well. That wasn't long enough, was it? I can keep going.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so long story short, we're going to see a lot more innovation now. I think Gibraltar is great to look for gaming innovation because 5 years ago, I think it is 5 years ago now that Lottoland basically started, right? And now they're this massive powerhouse behind online lotto. Well, I think they also started in Germany, right? So Gibraltar is a wonderful kind of like testing ground for new ideas. You have a lot of opportunities to get an idea out, soak it, see if it works, iterate over it, fail it, and then move on to something else. Because the clients are here, right? It's easy to chat to William Hill, 365, Bet Victor, etc. But also, I think everyone's realizing, like I said, if you don't continue to innovate, to push that boundary, you are going to fall behind because someone else is going to get there before you do.
Okay, well, good answer.
Thank you.
So, okay, as a CEO of a COO of a tech business, do you think the industry offers equal opportunities to men and women?
It is a trick question because I do actually think that most people are good people and most people don't discriminate willingly. I think there's a lot of societal expectation that manifests itself in these structures. So I do actually think that women are put at a disadvantage. I don't think it's by anyone in particular, usually. I mean, obviously there's always assholes, but but generally most people aren't, and most people don't discriminate, and so no one would say, yeah, I totally discriminate. So in a way, women are discriminated in two ways. So women are often seen as less competent, so you have the feeling that you need to prove yourself more, even though it would be nice if people were to just assume that you got your job because you're really good at what you're doing. Often that's not the case. And this goes for women as much as men. So this is not really a men-only problem. This is a societal problem. I think that's a larger problem, and that is women in high-risk environments like startups, economically speaking. So in a startup, you don't know where it's going to be in a couple of years, right? Because it's inherently less safe than working for a big corporation, because the big corporation is likely still going to exist in a couple of years. And from a fairly young age, I think it's drilled into women that you have to be able to rely on yourself, to not take big risks, to not become a burden on anyone else. I do think that women are more risk averse than men. But often the opportunities that are high risk, they're also high gain if you succeed, right? So women end up in positions that are safe, but they end up in positions that are safe. And I do think that's something that we need to shift. And I think one way of shifting that is it's a self-enforcing mechanism, right? So if you actually see a lot of people who are like yourself in positions of power or in positions that are risky positions, it changes your mental model of what a person who does something like that, what they're like. So, yeah.
Did I not get you the perfect guest? Stage. Okay, so we're going to talk about girls in tech now. Perfect timing. So Playtech has supported girls in tech, and as a team leader, can you tell us a little bit about what you do there? Both Playtech and in girls in tech, so it's even longer.
Okay, so I'll start with the easy story. So in Playtech, my title is CTO of Games Innovation Labs. What that means is I get to hire the smartest people I can find in the world to solve some of the hardest challenges that we have, which in return, for hiring them, they make me look great. And so, in all fairness, what I do is I try and provide an environment that really, really talented people can actually face quite difficult challenges and express themselves and fail safely. Fail fast and fail safe, which means that every time you fail, that's where you learn. You don't really learn from success. Success is what comes after a bazillion failures, right? And so this is the ethos that we have. We built a small startup environment within Playtech. Playtech respects that. They know we can fail. They know some money is just gonna get pissed down the drain, and they're okay with that, right? Because they know that hopefully at the end of the year or at the end of the 2 years cycle, we'll have something that's really interesting and really grabs the market's attention. So that's the easy answer. What I do in Girls in Tech? Well, first and foremost, I didn't start Girls in Tech in Gibraltar. My colleague Christina Turbatu did. She's in Romania at the moment, so I'm just like acting. I'm co-managing director. And what we do is we try and make sure that we create opportunities. When the Girls in Tech Gibraltar actually started after Christina got back from Romania, and she was lamenting the fact that there were no startups, there were no meetups for technical people to go to. There was nothing to actually entertain yourself at a technical level in the evenings or the weekends. And she's like, someone should start something. I'm like, yeah, someone should, right? And so she did. So this is where Girls in Tech is, and the idea is not to be some feminist group that kind of pushes the agenda. It's to actually create opportunities where both genders get to collaborate and learn together, realize that there is actual tangible benefits to having diversity, not just gender diversity, but diversity, truly engaged in creating solutions and creating product. Because if you have that diverse, or that diversity in perspective when solving problems, you're actually going to create a solution that appeals to far more of an audience. It doesn't appeal to a smaller segment. And coming back to Playtech, I can definitely testify to this being true. My developers, there's almost an equal mix. I wish there was an equal mix, but we're at the 40 to 60% ratio in terms of development talent, both men and women. And interestingly enough, coming to a point that Friederike made was that, you know, quite often women feel like they have to work extra hard to just prove themselves. So once you take that requirement away from that, right, once they walk into a team that is just, thank God you're here, we need your skills, we need you now, just get on with it, you actually see some really cool stuff happening, right? As long as there's a kind of a culture of respect for each other, what you actually find is that the guys will end up being the guys who shoot from the hip when it comes to problem solving, and it's the girls that kind of balance that off and they look at it from a different angle. They go, but what, if you do that, you're not going to hit the target. But if we kind of just adjust your aim, and then everyone realizes, yeah, absolutely right. And that's the value that you get out of diversity. You get that kind of adjustment within the team saying, yeah, you'll hit one target, but we could hit 3 of them if we go this way.
Great. So Friederike, you turned it off. So Friederike, I wanted to know a little bit more about the working environment at Gnosis and the business model, what you do there.
So basically, we're a blockchain startup. What we're doing is we are building market mechanisms for a distributed world. So we're devising systems on blockchain that allow you to trade information and assets and ideas that previously wasn't tradable. So things like little pieces of information that you may have that may be worth something to someone else, but that currently you can't monetize. So for instance, say you know exactly what the traffic patterns in Gibraltar are. So you know exactly when the planes are coming in and out, you know exactly when it's faster to book, and Google doesn't know, right? So basically you type in how do I get from here to wherever fastest, and Google will tell you. And often Google is actually wrong because Google doesn't actually have these micro patterns. So basically this information is actually worth something to a lot of people. And we're building mechanisms that actually let you trade those micro pieces of information. They also let you trade assets and conditional assets. So basically assets like certain assets that you can trade now under the condition that something else has happened or that something else is going to happen. That is something that is also currently not something that is publicly tradable, and we're building mechanisms to do that. And the reason we can do that is because we do that. We build the mechanisms in such a way that they're trustless. They don't really they don't require an expert to actually devise those financial instruments. It's just done on blockchain, and because it's done on blockchain, you don't actually need to have a third party who actually sells you these assets, where you actually have some sort of trust in the third party. You can just trade them peer to peer. Yeah, sorry, that was a long answer.
It was the long answer, and for most of us, a very complicated one. But thanks for letting us know. So tell me a little bit about the environment of the startup. Well, Gnosis as a startup, what is the environment like to work there?
So for blockchain startup, we are actually fairly diverse. I am in awe that you actually have 40% female developers. We don't. We aspire to 50-50, but we're not close. We are around a third women, which for a blockchain startup is not bad. We are close to 60 people now worldwide, a couple of them here in Gibraltar. Then we have a large tech hub in Berlin and another one in Spain, and a lot of remote people who work remotely.
Okay, so you don't get to see each other very often, basically.
Yeah, so actually we make it a point to meet up twice a year for a week. So we had one of those retreats last week in Germany, and that helps tremendously. So basically, remote work is something that is not easy on everyone all the time, because often it just helps to see your co-workers, and it helps diffuse situations, and it helps seeing people not just as a Slack handle, but as an actual human being. So we've actually found these offsites extremely valuable.
I think most remote companies usually have 1, 2, 3 events during the year, but I'm a firm believer in remote work, and I think a lot of startups have that sort of culture. I think it would really work in Gibraltar. Do you? In Gibraltar in general, do you think the remote working model would be a good model to follow?
Yes, so basically what we do is we actually have hubs for the people who work together in certain places. So we have an office here and we have an office in other places, because we actually do also think that an ecosystem is important for people. So just other people who are not necessarily even in the same company to bounce ideas off of. I'm based in Berlin most of the time, and what we've actually built is a co-working space for crypto startups. So basically a lot of the old and very techy blockchain startups, they actually work out of our shared office, and that's been a tremendously enriching experience for all of us, because we all face a lot of the same problems as a young and emergent technology.
Cool. So Peter, I wanted to ask you, you used to work for Adobo, and that was a startup. Tell us about how that prepared you for later on any challenges you came across.
Okay, so there are a lot of things that are different between being in a startup and being in a company that has a relative amount of safety around, funding, just general people available to do work. So I've always been in startups. Actually, not being in a startup is kind of weird for me. So Adobo was different because I had been in a startup from the beginning, right? Basically, just starting the thing up, blank sheet of paper and saying, all right, well, we have this idea, how are we going to do this? So what it taught me was how to actually sell ideas, and this is something that I think the crypto space has done remarkably well. ICO land has been incredibly well executed. Selling ideas and getting people to believe in those ideas to the point where they're willing to fund you is actually incredibly difficult, but a skill that you only learn in a startup. Once you have that skill, transferring that into a bigger corporation like Playtech, it actually becomes quite valuable, because you're not looking for funding, you're looking for buy-in. You have the board, you have stakeholders, you have shareholders who have to buy in to your vision of a new product. They're about to spend X amount of pounds for the next 2 years funding an idea that you've just presented to them in a PowerPoint. You got to make them believe, right? Even if you're like 50-50 hedging that it's going to fail, you got to make those guys believe, and women, that they should be funding this idea. And that is honestly one of the hardest parts of innovation, because everyone has ideas. You need to be able to translate that into something that you can get someone else to understand and believe and fund, right? It's incredibly tough. The other thing that it prepared me for was incredible amounts of disappointment, because the reason I'm not in Adobo anymore is because Adobo is no more. And so that happened because we just ran out of cash. It was an amazing business model. We had so many great blueprints which have transferred over to Playtech, and we're developing those now within the opportunities that a big corporate gives us. But the disappointment of working on a project for 5.5 years and then realizing that not only did you have to build this up, but now you have to tear it down, what I called wet work, because it's really painful saying goodbye to people that you've been together on a journey with since they bought into your idea, they believed in it, and you failed. And that is tough. So if anyone is looking for a psychologist, I have 3 that I highly recommend. Those are the 2 key things it taught me. The last thing it taught me is never accept the de facto way of doing things as the right way of doing things. And this is something you will hear quite often when you join a bigger company. But we've always done it this way. Okay, that's great. Does it work? Yeah. Well, maybe you can work better. Maybe we can save money. Maybe we can do things quicker. Have you thought about that? No. And the things that startup teaches you is you have to think quicker. You have to solve things better. You have to spend less money doing more. And you've got to get past that barrier of change, because in startup everything changes all the time. So those 3 things, if you haven't been in a startup, quit your job, get into a startup, go and experience that, and then go back to earning a salary, because it is so worthwhile having that experience.
That was your advice, not mine. But I second that. So, okay, Friederike, back to more serious stuff. You're the Secretary General, listen to this because it's a long one, for the German think tank Bundesblock, which informs and advises the German government on blockchain policy. Are these roles mainly, usually male-dominated, and how does it feel to be in that role?
Funnily, the world of policy is very much female-dominated. So it's well, maybe not female-dominated, but it's very close to equal in genders. So yeah, so I think it's because women often feel a desire to give back and to shape society, and in policy making, both of those things come together.
That's great. So what kind of role do you play in these policy making as advisor, or can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. So basically, first of all, it's a thing that actually, the very first mandate is to actually inform. So to actually to explain how blockchain actually works, and it's a very techy thing. So you try to break it down, and you try to make people who are not natively IT minded understand what in principle it entails, and most importantly what the big value add is. So basically, once you have sown that idea into people's minds, they become converts, and then you can move into explaining what the policy challenges are for us today, and how that could be counteracted, and what kind of regulation would be nice. So basically, no regulation is pretty devastating for an industry, because it puts you in very unsecure ground. But bad regulation is possibly even worse. So basically, there is something to be said for slow regulation that is careful and well thought out, and doesn't rush things. And obviously that takes a lot of time, because I mean, everyone who's ever spoken with a regulator knows that they are smart people. They like thinking about problems, and most problems there's not an easy answer to. So it's always walking a narrow line between too much in this direction and too much in that direction, and we help them find the right path. We hope to inform them so they can find the right path themselves. But yeah, I think subject matter experts are very important for that process.
Okay, so Peter, can you, well, not to say that you're not serious, you're very serious. So can you tell me a little bit about why it's important to you? You said Christina wanted to fill a gap in Gibraltar, but I wanted to know a little bit more about why it's important to you as a man. So I think these conversations are important to have between men and women, not just women, to have something like Girls in Tech.
So I touched on a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I think building solutions, if you have more perspectives, and I realize Girls in Tech is predominantly focusing on the gender diversity topic, but if you look at the broader, just general diversity topic, the more perspectives you have, the better you're going to build a product. At the end of the day, we're all here to make money, right? So if we can build a product that appeals to 10% of the population, as opposed to building the same product just from a different perspective that appeals to 30%, which one would you rather do, right? You want to build a product that has the biggest potential to acquire an audience, repeat customers, subscribers, or whatever it is that you want to do. So why I believe in kind of, and I'm involved in the Girls in Tech thing, is I think diversity is an incredibly large topic. And if you just look at gender diversity, the challenges that we face with the gender pay gap versus equal pay, versus unconscious bias versus affinity bias. These are seriously tough topics, right? And they're really tough to solve. I can't even imagine venturing out of just gender diversity and looking at racial or social. It's mind-boggling. So, small topic with big consequences, and it's something that we can do something about. And I think I have this anecdote. When I was working in Adobe, I didn't have an HR team for the first 2 years. So any CVs that came through, basically, you work with a recruiting agency and they'll send you everything, which is great because you really get to see a lot of people that you wouldn't normally have seen. They're not filtered by HR's policies or filtering criteria. And I thought to myself, great, now I'm going to see everything. And whenever I was hiring for engineering staff or technical staff, I noticed that there was a severe lack of female candidates coming through. And I couldn't blame HR for filtering. So I went out and I asked the recruiting agents what's going on. Well, why am I not getting more female candidates? And they said they're just not applying. And so that kind of got me interested. Then in about 2000 and I think it was 15, the whole GitHub sexism scandal went off, and some guy later on in a conference talked about a build tool as his girlfriend. And this entire scandal went off, and everyone's going, what the is going on? But the beauty about that is it actually really shone a spotlight into the severe problem that tech had in Silicon Valley, and therefore, Silicon Valley is kind of the epicenter of tech, and everything ripples out. So if you see it there, it will be happening elsewhere. That's at least the way I see it. And so when you look inside some of the tech firms, you actually see that guys are quite biased, right? You'll have three guys and 3 ladies in a tech meeting discussing tech, and there will actually only be 3 people talking, right? Not 6. Because 3 voices just kind of get ignored and drowned out because they're just not relevant. That's a very, very poor culture to have, but that actually does happen in the tech industry. Now, it's getting better, but to solve it, you can't just have women running around going, hey, listen to me. No. What you need is men to be aware of the problem. And so Girls in Tech is fully all-inclusive. Everything we do, we want guys to be part of the story as well as women, because they need to understand that A, there's a problem, and B, recognize that actually working together is far better than just working apart and having 6 people on a payroll but only 3 people are actually doing the work, right? Even though 6 want to do the work. So, does that answer the question?
Well, I was just thinking while you were talking, can we have a girls in everything? Because it sounds to me like we need that kind of thing in a lot of different industries, not just tech.
Yeah, agreed.
Do a girls in everything. So Friederike, what advice would you give to women moving into this industry?
Oh, don't be afraid to fail. I mean, everyone fails. That's how you learn. And if you can't do something that doesn't reflect badly on you, I think what kind of should reflect badly on you is if you don't try. And I think just having fun with it and not being so self-conscious about how other people may view you at that very point in time, I think that helps tremendously. So just caring a little bit less what other people think. I think that's not just good advice for women, it's good advice for everyone, but it's good advice particularly for women, because I think often we do care too much.
Cool. So as a closing remark, I'll stay with you for the moment. What are your thoughts on Gibraltar's positioning as a startup and tech hub, and what could we improve?
Gibraltar is a wonderful place. It's a very small place where people know each other well. People know how things work, and that has an upside and a downside, right? So basically, you always know whom to talk to, but that also has a flip side, in that often there's not enough outside perspective coming in. So I think that is something that is already being addressed. So I feel like more and more people from outside Gibraltar are actually starting techie things in Gibraltar. Yeah, but It's a wonderful place and great weather. I can say that because at home it's 5 degrees.
So Gnosis plans in Gibraltar, tell us a little bit more about that.
So we're currently seeking to be regulated by the GFSC under the GIT framework that was pioneered this year. We're venturing an application, business that is offering itself to businesses as a way of information discovery. So basically, say if you're a large business and you would like to know some piece of information that is not publicly available, so something like a good forecast for how many electric vehicles will be registered in Spain next year, then you would fund a prediction market or an information market and would have people give you their best guesstimate. And people who actually know who have a good idea of what the answer might be, can do that and give you a way of hedging your risks and planning out your future.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to end with you. What can Gibraltar improve and how do you see us growing as a tech and startup hub? You know, it's a tough one.
I think we need to focus more on our infrastructure. Specifically, the internet infrastructure is getting better. It needs to get substantially better. It's got to be on par with Europe. We need to cheaper rent. You know, it's mental because everyone worries about the border. You know, hiring people and relocating them now. The first question they ask is the border still a problem? Because they read that 3 or 4 years ago, right? These are the headlines that stick with people outside of Gibraltar who don't work here. So make the obvious problems go away and introduce far more complex ones, whatever, but just make the obvious ones go away. Make it just more exciting for tech people to be here. Get Facebook, get Google, get the big companies interested in the country itself. Get some investment. Girls in Tech, startup grind, we can only do that much, right? But imagine if Facebook came along and said, you know what, here's a weekend of craziness. I mean, we don't have a venue for Web Summit, but imagine how cool it would be to run Web Summit Gibraltar. That would be amazing. I'd be willing to pay at least £10 for that, right?
Right, thank you.
But in all seriousness, I think it's about opportunity, it's about engagement, bringing the community together, growing the community. The one thing that Gibraltar does have and should never change is the welcoming embrace for strangers and different cultures. This is the one thing that is it's out of this world. Just everyone kind of just gets on here, right? It doesn't matter how varied your background is, what religion or race or culture you are, you're just welcome. And that is incredibly powerful, and that is the one pillar that Gibraltar has that we model our business to.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you. So, if anyone has any questions for either Peter and Friederike, they're both extremely interesting people, and we're so glad that you made it here and you had such a cool banter going on. So they can take some questions now, or you can ask them some questions during our networking session. I just want to say a quick thank you, because without everyone who is here to help out with these events every month, we wouldn't be making it a success of these events. So I'd like to thank Margaret, my co-director, who's back there, Alsbeta and over there, who's been helping out tonight, Oscar, who had to leave, Stan for filming and sound, Josie for her pictures, and Abacus, who are our sponsors, Gibraltar Finance, who are not here, and the World Trade Center for giving us the venue, our partners GBX, University of Gibraltar, and most of all you guys for coming. Thank you very much.